If you want more, check out Wooden Potato's lore video on this because it's fantastic.
Whoa, no way, but that's me! Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Yeah, that was pretty awesome. We got a shout out today. Ruby took a second to talk about the lore, and specifically because we did a video talking about Shiro, we got a little bit of a plug. It was actually really cool. I like that she's dedicating some time on the stream, even though, yeah, we're all chomping at the bits for the mechanical information. There's a cool story behind Shiro, right? And it's nice that a lot of people who don't know it can at least have some small chance to learn a bit about maybe what the envoys are and his kind of whole dealio. So anyway, today was the stream. This showed off all the Shiro mechanics. Roy sat down with us and talked us through it all. He actually also did a large forum post that was posted shortly after the live stream talking about big changes to the Revenant in general. There is a ton to say, as ever, when they do these live streams, so I'll try and get through quickly. First of all, base changes to the Revenant. Number one, Revenant now has a weapon swap. Oh yes! They've got a weapon swap. So this is a huge change. You guys will remember early speculation was, hey, the first expansion could give us a third heavy armor class. And for the light and the medium guys, they got two professions that can weapon swap and one that can't. So they're going to follow that pattern. And I think, you know, based just on that logic, ArenaNet kind of wanted that to be for the Revenant too, and they wanted it to be a class without a weapon swap. But the truth is, a lot of us have been feeling it's not got much wiggle room for builds, it's not got much power behind it either, and there was a lot of feedback from it, and Roy seems to have sat down, read through a lot of it, and has kind of led the way, it seems, in enacting a lot of changes. One of them being, they now have weapon swap. It's funny, about an hour or two before the stream even went live, someone left a message on the subreddit saying, hey, is this even a good solution? Lots of people are suggesting it, and I was a bit lukewarm to the idea. However, now seeing it, yeah, it does address some of the build diversity issues, and the skill cap for the profession at least has gone up. It will feel kind of interesting toggling between two different stances on the left and the right of your bar. You know, it's a bit like Ellie in that you've got four kind of sets that you're toggling through, though Ellie, of course, gets the utility skills on top, so the analogy isn't perfect, but it's gonna kind of feel weird balancing between the two sets, and I think it will be one of those professions that when you randomly drop in, maybe for the PvP daily or something, you're like, oh, right, yeah, I've really got to get into Revenant mode, and I've got to start splitting my brain and thinking about what I want to swap through. And yes, it does address some of the build stuff. Now, when choosing our weapons, it's a bit more than just saying, I want to run mace sword or sword mace. It can actually be, I want to run sword axe on one set and mace sword on the other set, so I still get both my swords that just split through. You know, very much like we have with the warrior. It does give us that wiggle room. I do say it's not the whole solution, the way that gear works, and we kind of only build into one stat set, but we're going to be having like the double rolls going on seems a bit weird, but we'll see how it plays out. In general, I think Revenant's going to be doing a lot better. Some other base changes as well. Now, yeah, these came in the way of a forum post. I'd love to talk about them before we get into Shiro. A lot of people, as we know, felt that Revenant was really low damage, and that's just a fact, it was. So, the hammer, for example. Hammers, they want to stay really slow, kind of range, they like the weight behind them, but the damage has gone up massively. One of the abilities, the one that like teleports you forward and then back, had a 75% boost to its base damage. Across the board, damage numbers are much higher. The same is true for Staff. The same is true for Ventari or Centaur stance stuff that heals. Like, all of the healing power scaling is now much higher on these also. The problem with Staff and Ventari before, or Revenant in general, was it was doing low DPS, and that's fine, but even when you tried to play into what it was supposed to be good at, so like with the Staff healing people, or the tablet healing people, it wasn't even that great at that either. So now the healing power scaling has gone up, and that's kind of the theme of a lot of changes. I talked to you guys when it was originally revealed, the Ventari elite skill seemed kind of naff. The knockback range on it is now much bigger, so this is the skill where you explode the tablet. People used to be sort of knocked back just a little bit, now it's a 450 range knockback, which is huge, and the associated salvation trait with it that also turns that into a daze has had its duration increased. And I complained about this before too, because it's like, oh, it's already knocking people back, who cares if there's like a tiny little daze that goes on top of that, except now it will just strip a little bit more stability. Well, now that daze has been lengthened as well, so people will really feel the full force of that. They'll stand up and they'll still be dazed for an appreciable length of time. A lot of skills felt really slow. There was even like a bug in the way that the Revenant worked, Roy talked about on the forums, which was essentially if you traded for Invocation, then whenever you used like the right hand side of your skill bar, it was firing traits at the same time and it was slowing everything down. It basically broke the skill queuing system. And now that that's gone, they've made the ability to swap legends instantly baseline, and now the trait just makes it a stun break. There was more tank things that changed as well. Retribution, the line, for example. They had a bunch of tanky stuff that really wasn't that great. They even say that they want to make this class tank-like. There's that word again coming up from the devs, and there's just been lots of buffs like that. Mace and Axe are now applying a lot more condis. Malix has had changes to stop your condi duration affecting your self-inflicted condi, so it doesn't feel crappy to spec yourself that way. One of their Grandmaster traits, Diabolic Inferno, that was applying burning when you use your elite skill. Obviously, burning changed a lot since they first implemented this, and now instead of just 1 stack, it gives you 2 stacks and for longer of burning, so the condi angle should be stronger too. Last big change was Invocation. Invocation had 2 weird minors in it. That was, while you're attuned to a legend, whenever you use a skill that costs energy on a 5-second cooldown, it creates a swirling orb of mist, and these orbs, if they hit an ally, they'll heal them. But then when you legend swap, the orbs would get destroyed, but then there was another minor that meant that they'd all get sucked into you and heal you up. Kind of an interesting mechanic. I guess it's to keep you in a stance for a while, to reward you for being in a stance for a long time, and then when you finally do swap, you kind of get this big heal and this big replenishment. But weird, and they've actually removed that whole angle now completely, and they've been changed with traits that synergize with Fury. So now it's gain Fury when you weapon swap baseline, and it deals 7% more damage while under the effects of Fury. Why is that cool? Well, because you can be in your legendary stance and then swap to Shiro, get Fury, start critting all over the place, and more damage with that Fury, and then you can wreck face. So let's talk about Shiro. Roy was referring to, and Ruby as well, I believe, quite frequently as like the assassin stance. I like their very candid use of the word assassin there. I feel like they'd be walking on eggshells around that term if the thief specialization was named assassin. So this is my speculation. I don't think the thief specialization is going to be called assassin. Not many of us were in that boat anyway, but this is kind of the final nail in the coffin for me. Alright, let's talk about the sword skills. Your attack is bonkers, like completely bonkers. The Shiro or Devastation specialized Revenants will be getting vulnerability on their attacks, and the auto is also applying vulnerability. It goes vulnerability on the first attack, then the second attack isn't just another vulnerability attack, it's like a little boomerang thing that fires out, cleaves enemies behind whoever you're targeting, and then boomerangs back in. So it hits your target twice. It goes hit and then hit. This is a little bit like the axe chain for warrior. And then the third attack is what we heard on the blog post yesterday. Puts the little rift slash in someone that after a delay then blows up. And it autos fast. So you're looking at these auto attacks. Yeah, that's tons of Vuln. This guy's stacking up to 16 Vuln just from autoing. Vuln is really not something hard to come by in PvE anymore, like at all. So some people are like, oh, rip this class, rip that class, we were providing Vuln before. Guys, we were out of that situation a long time ago. So yeah, very convincing auto attack, and it's kind of got semi-cleaving capability. The main target is going to be taking the brunt of your damage, but then like the boomerangs are cleaving, and then the rift slash at the end is also cleaving 3 targets. So it's kind of got this weird little play about it, and in a lot of situations where you've got like a big target and then lots of little targets around it, it's still pretty good. So that's quite nice. The skill 2 is called Precision Strike. This is what we heard again from the blog post. Throws out a couple of bolts that chill people. The chill is really short duration. It's just 1 second chill duration. Funnily enough, I mentioned on my previous video, I said, why did they go with chill instead of cripple? And Roy kind of actually even said in this live stream, apparently the Revenant gets no cripple anywhere. Like it's just one of those condis that isn't on the class. They kind of do this on occasion to help classes feel distinct in certain ways. Cripple's just not really a Revenant thing, so they're getting chill. And there's not too much more to say about that skill. The skill 3, so this has got a fairly short cooldown, okay, shorter than I was expecting. This is Unrelenting Assault, and this is what we saw in the trailer Ritlock using. The animation is just crazy. I love this new tech they've got where the character can be flying around doing lots of stuff without moving the camera, as again we saw on the hammer skills before. My goodness, that thing looks really cool. It's 7 strikes, gain 1 might every time you strike someone. Reminds me a lot of Fiora. Is it Fiona? From League of Legends, her ult, and you're just going to be slashing the hell out of your primary target. If other people are nearby, you'll bounce around as well throughout those 7 hits. So if you can isolate someone and then use it, they will take all 7 of those strikes and be hit for an awful lot of damage, of course. So how can you maintain that? Well, the next 2 skills, the offhand sword skills, really help you land that skill 3. So the skill 4, I think it's called Duelist Preparation. And this is kind of your riposte attack. As we speculated, it's an offhand sword. It does have this block thing. It seems a little bit better than the other ones on the other classes. Like with Warrior and with Mesmer, if you counter someone with this attack, but you block the first attack, and if someone's in melee, you stop blocking and you immediately counter. On Revenant, however, you will just stay blocking for the full duration. So it's really useful. And if you happen to block something during that duration, you then have the choice of using the other attack at your leisure. I actually hope that all the skills that function like this are changed changed and updated, because this is a much better way of doing it. So you're going to block for 2 seconds, got a little bit of defense there, a little bit of utility there, and then you will be able to use Shackling Wave. And Shackling Wave throws out like a little wave of energy, not too far ranged, but if it hits people, then it will immobilize them, as well as doing some fair damage. And like your auto attack little boomerang, this won't come back, but it will hit those 3 targets in kind of a similar way. So why is that immob really good? Because you can immobilize someone and then go straight into your unrelenting assault, and they can't like dodge roll out of it unless they manage to pull off a Condi cleanse or use some other defenses of theirs. So that's got some synergy there. And again, the skill 5-2 really plays into Unrelenting Assault. This is called Grasping Shadows. Grasping Shadows is a bit like we saw the Reaper's gonna get on their greatsword. You're gonna pick a target and then you're gonna pull them to you. But what's special about this is before you pick that target, you shadow step back 600 range. So, I mean, it's really clear when you see in the footage here, you can be stood in melee with them, and then you activate the ability, you dart back, and then you pull them into you. And why is this cool? Well, this has just isolated them. So I wonder if there's a means for us to pop the skill 4, get our emob ready, use the skill 5, isolate someone, immediately emob them in place, and then Unrelenting Assault. And now that they are separated, all 7 of those strikes are going to splash down on that person, and you're going to be able to spike them out. So that's kind of a basic little rotation that I'm sure we'll be doing in World vs. World and PvP at least, and for funsies and PvE while we're running around. I doubt we'll really see too much of that like in dungeon scenarios, but hey, they've got the really nice auto attack to make up for that. So the swords I think are really well designed, really fun. The only lackluster one I think is the 2, like the chill duration seems really short, but this thing looks powerful enough. I would say, on the topic of how overpowered this is, I don't mind it looking completely bonkers in these initial release trailers, just to get people excited about the profession and value its potential. You know, I was looking at chat a lot during this stream, and there's tons of people very excited, but there's also an awful lot of comments of people just bitching, saying, oh, my thief is now useless. Oh, this is now useless. Oh, this is totally overpowered. This is so stupid. It's weird that, you know, the developers are kind of in this catch-22 where if they make something look really lackluster and poor, it's just going to generate no interest for the profession at all and be really damaging. But then also, if they make it look good, it also is damaging in a way, because a lot of people are really disappointed that it's overshadowing their classes. And I think this is a big problem for Guild Wars 2, because they've always kind of struggled, in my opinion, with making classes feel very distinct in what each one does, because we kind of all do everything. But I would just say, take it with a grain of salt, guys. Like, just be happy if it looks strong. Don't forget that this, in the end, is the Revenant that has so far been incredibly undertuned, not overtuned. And that should buy them at least, you know, a little leeway. Alright, so those are the sword skills. Then Ruby went into a little bit of a lore section, and she talked a little bit about us on this channel, and talked a bit about how the lore worked for Shiro, who this character was, but I won't spend time tooting my own horn. And then we went on to the Shiro skills themselves. So do remember, Nike was actually tweeting about this just before I started recording this video. Do remember that you don't necessarily need to slot Shiro as a legend to be able to do a lot of damage, because you can still equip the swords and you can still specialize devastation traits without even using him. So you can still be using like the utility, like the Ventara utility, for really good projectile destruction if you want. So these are kind of just, again, enabling you to do the damage. They don't do the damage themselves. However, that said, the heal skill does do damage. This is Enchanted Daggers, we heard about it before. It's basically putting a buff on you. That means your next 6 hits will do additional damage, and that additional damage that they do is fed to you as life. They give some good footage of this here, and actually I was really happy to see this. It reminds me of playing old Way of Perfection Assassins from the first game. Way of Perfection was an old skill, a buff that you'd put on yourself, and every time you critically hit, you'd gain a little bit of health. So it kind of had this, if you attack really fast, you see your health going back up, and just seeing that in Guild Wars 2 got me very excited. So that's the heal. Let's pretend for a second I didn't forget about Signet of Malice. Okay, thanks. Then we saw Reposting Shadows. This wasn't talked about before, not on the blog, and this has been named after one of the original Shiro boss battle skills. It's not really the same functionally, though. I would say Unrelenting Assault is more functionally similar to Reposting Shadows, but this is essentially Withdraw. You know how thieves get Withdraw, they get Evade backwards. That's what the Revenant gets too. It will also cleanse stuff like Immobilize, Chill, Cripple, just as Lightning Reflexes does also for the Ranger. And I think this is really really useful. Again, if you're going to play a very glassy Revenant, so far, what have we actually seen that's kind of safety? We've seen a 2-second block on the offhand for the sword, and perhaps a little bit of safety while you're in Unrelenting Assault, but that's not too much. So this extra evade is going to be really nice, and specifically, remember, you don't have a cooldown to contend with, you have energy to contend with. So energy permitting, you can actually use this thing a lot of times to get out of tricky situations. You have to remember that with all of these Revenant skills. Then also, if you want to move back in after your opposing shadows, you have phased traversal. They talked about this on the blog. This is the targeted shadow step, makes you unblockable. It's for 2 attacks, you're going to be unblockable. They've got an interesting trait for that as well, we'll talk about soon. Then, the third and final utility before the elite is Impossible Odds! Hell yeah! So Impossible Odds is a part of Shiro. Funnily enough, though, and we'll talk about the skill in a second, the skill is pretty crazy. Funnily enough, you know, in the time since I'd heard about that trait idea, which we discussed before earlier this week, I really liked the idea of it being a Grandmaster trait that procced at low health. And now I was almost slightly disappointed to see it was just kind of a regular skill. But so Impossible Odds, it just makes so much sense as a trait. Impossible Odds is this. It's your upkeep. I was wondering if the heal was your upkeep. It's not. Impossible Odds is the upkeep, and it will drain your energy very fast. Okay, so consider that before what I'm about to say. But while you have Impossible Odds up, which you can activate at your leisure, you will have basically permanent quickness and permanent super speed. As long as you have the energy, you can just toggle these things on. So you're just going to be really, really fast. Super fitting, super on theme with what Shiro did with Impossible Odds in the previous game. And now think about all that other stuff I talked about. Think about being able to pull people away with your swords and then use an Unrelenting Assault. All that stuff will move much faster and allow for some really interesting plays that are just going to destroy your energy, though, if you mess them up. And that's what's exciting about it to me, that it's not just loads of damage, but it's kind of high risk as well. Because if you mess it up, you suddenly have no energy for other defensive stuff like, oh, I don't know, riposting shadows or popping your heal or doing other useful things. In fact, Roy did mention that now that Revenant has a weapon swap too, this plays into energy as well. Like, energy management is becoming a bigger mechanic because now you've got a bunch of other really cool skills that all have energy costs across 2 weapons and 2 legends, and balancing them all is now a fine line. And that's kind of what I mean when I say it's not just swapping between 4 different sets to being paired together, it's balancing that energy as well, knowing where your strong stuff is and knowing, can you weapon swap or can you legend swap to activate that ability you really want right in that moment? Do you even have the energy for it? And that's what's going to punish bad players and really allow good players to do very well in specs like Shiro and stuff that we've seen. So that's Impossible Odds. And finally, we have the elite skill. That's Jade Winds. Jade Winds we heard about in the blog post. This turns everyone to Jade. It's a lot like Basilisk Venom. The stun is longer than I thought. It's 3 seconds, so it's pretty strong. I don't know whether this is going to be the same as Ice Block in that it cannot be stun broken. You kind of have to sit through it or blink out of it. My hunch says that it will be stun breakable like other stuff. They've started to introduce the idea of stripping multiple stacks of Defiant as well, which we'll talk about in the traits, and that's going to kind of have some play there. And don't forget as well, you have Impossible Odds, so though this is a wind-up ability, you can Impossible Odds yourself for quickness and then pop Jade Winds for a quick stun, and again, like that these skills just kind of all feed into one another. Alright. There should have been some footage on the screen as well of Roy fighting some random mobs. He wasn't seemingly critting that much here, so I have no idea what amulet he was on. I also don't know whether, because he hadn't talked about traits yet, he actually had, like, good traits slotted, like devastation stuff, or even other specialization slotted at all. I don't know whether we're seeing the full power or what, but hey, this is a bit better than we saw before, where people were, like, on friggin' soldier amulets and stuff trying to fight. So let's look at devastation. This is the Shiro trait line. I'll try and go through quite quickly. A lot of it's pretty basic. They even kind of copy-pasted a trait we see on a lot of the other classes. I saw some complaints in Twitch chat about it, but, you know, it's a staple trait, and I think it makes sense as a Grandmaster, and I don't mind that it's on a core specialization for one of the other professions. It's fine. Alright, so we got devastation. Let's talk about the miners first. They're doing a thing with the miners that we've seen on a couple of other professions now, where they theme all of the miners around like one boon or one condition. So like Invocation now, for the Revenant, all those miners feed into each other to do with Fury, and you see similar stuff on the other professions. Well, Devastation is themed around vulnerability, alright? So the first miner is all your attacks have a 25% chance to apply vulnerability, which lasts for 4 seconds. Don't believe there's an internal cooldown. So again, this is why the autos are getting so high. 16 vuln on just an auto attack is mental. So you're putting a lot of vuln out. And think about the fact that Unrelenting Assault and a lot of your abilities are doing lots of multiple strikes. The next miner is 7% more damage to 2 vulnerable enemies. So that sounds pretty good. In dungeons, that's just, you know, more flat damage for you, more modifiers, which are always useful. But I like to think of it this way as well. as just a solo player, just running around, that first vulnerability you put on people is worth 7 stacks. That's kind of an interesting way of thinking of it. So, yeah, 7% more damage to vulnerable enemies. And lastly, when you strike a foe who is vulnerable, you siphon life. So there is a lot of life still going on here, but it revolves around Vuln. And if you can keep the Vuln off of you while you're fighting a Shiro person, then they're going to lose some of their sustain. Though how easy it's going to be to keep Vuln off of you fighting someone like this, I have no idea. Overall, I really like what they're doing with these minors, where they're all based around one thing, and they're like all thematically resolved around like just one condition or one boon, and I would be happy to see that put more across the other classes too. Let's look at Adept. So these are the ones we choose. You're going to choose either Assassin's Presence, Rapid Lacerations, or Malicious Reprisal. Assassin's Presence is increased ferocity of all nearby allies by 150. A staple trait. We finally got the ferocity version. This was data mined. Makes lots of sense. Rapid Lacerations is when you attack with a sword, you will gain stacks of basically mini quickness. They call it 2% skill speed. So you can gain up to 5 of these. So you can get 10% faster attack speed just by attacking people using a sword. So that's when you have a sword main hand or a sword offhand. So these will stack up to 10%, and even better than that, this bonus will then stack with quickness. So you can attack someone a bunch of times. You're already activating stuff 10% faster, and then you can pop impossible odds and then get the full bonus of quickness on top of it. It's not like having 25% move speed and then popping swiftness and you don't get the full benefit of the swiftness. No, this is all stacking together. And now think about like Unrelenting Assault and how quick you'd attack with that if you go for your big spike like that. The third and final one you could choose in this first slot is Malicious Reprisal, which is when you are blocked, then you gain 2 attacks which cannot be blocked. So, and this is on a 30-second cooldown. So this is kind of if you're fighting tankier people. Think, because you attack so fast in a PvP scenario, think about attacking a Guardian who pops Shelter at very low health. You attack them once and they block it, but then your attacks are so fast, you're going to attack again, and those next 2 are actually going to get through and possibly kill someone. Roy also talked about the possibility of using something like this, and it's the same for your Shiro abilities, to then pop Jade Winds, and now you have a 3-second stun on a bunch of people that is also unblockable. I think these picks are really well balanced against one another, and like none of them is a clear winner to me, especially depending on the game type you're in, so that's cool. The next decision you get to make is at the Master level. Now you're going to take Jade Echo, Nefarious Momentum, or Ferocious Strikes. Jade Echo is the one we heard about on the blog post, and this is when you go downstate, you release Jade Winds for free. This has a 90-second internal cooldown. I am very happy to see that, because I don't like that frustrating thought of every time I fight a Revenant, they're going to pop this. Generally for PvP speaking, when it's 90 seconds plus on a cooldown, they're not going to have it every single team fight, but when it's like 60 seconds or lower for cooldowns, you tend to find they have it every single time. That's really frustrating. So 90, I would say, is the bare minimum, the lowest it can go before it starts getting really annoying, and I'm happy to see they went with the 90. And then this also, even if it is on cooldown, it will increase your downed damage by 25%. You don't really do much flat down damage as a Revenant. You are applying Torment and Slow and teleporting people away, so I'm not sure how much this component will be really fun, but fine. Next one is Nefarious Momentum. When you use Assassin Stance skills, you gain 2 might. So you can pop your heal, which is going to buff your damage because you're getting these extra life siphon strikes, and give yourself 2 free might. Pop impossible odds before you move in for your Unrelenting Assault, and you're starting with 4 might. It's okay, but I actually don't think this trait has too much synergy with the Shiro stuff. Like Jade Winds, 2 might given me, Reposting Shadows, I don't see it being too fun. And then the last one, Ferocious Strikes, 150 ferocity while dual wielding. And yeah, you can take that and stack it with Assassin's Presence for another 150. So Revenant's going to have very high ferocity. And this whole dual wielding thing, that doesn't just mean sword. That means if you want, you could do it on mace axe. And consider as well, if the elite specialization gives us a shield, anything you're using with that shield also can give you the benefit of Ferocious Strikes. Alright, let's talk about the Grandmaster tier. These Grandmasters weren't too exciting to me, but they're functional. So we've got number 1, Swift Termination, 20% more damage while the foe is below 50% health. And yeah, we see this on other classes, right? What is this, the 4th class that's getting this trait? But it's a trait that works. It's a trait that people like. It's a trait that you can feel the difference when you run it. And it's totally on theme with Devastation, so fine. I think it's actually okay. Next, I want to talk about Assassin's Annihilation, and this is when you attack from behind or the side, siphon health. And so this will play into the other life siphon stuff you get too. And again, this is this cool like Way of Perfection assassin playstyle. If these life siphons are strong enough, maybe steps a bit on Blood Magic Necromancer's toes, but they also get a lot of other different themed utility like around the downstate when they run that. So I think that could also be quite nice and is a fun idea. Now, the last Grandmaster, I don't really agree with it. Like, I like the trait, but I think it's in the wrong place. So, it's Dismantle Fortifications. You remove 2 stability instead of 1 whenever you would remove stability. That's a cool idea. Now that stability stacks intensity, that's a cool idea, and I want to see more of this stuff. I get very frustrated when I see, like, an Elementalist friggin' pop Armor of Earth, and I'm playing, like, my Interrupt Mesmer, for example, and I'm like, well, I'm never getting through that, and it's too short duration to coordinate, like, a huge burst against other people. It's just annoying. So, Dismantled Fortifications, I like the theme of this idea, but what I don't like is that this is in the Shiro line. Like, Roy said, oh, you know, Shiro's supposed to be a lot about debuffing people and then getting those big hits off, and yeah, I can see vulnerability is a big part of that, but I don't think it should be about debuffing everything. Shouldn't we be looking to some of the other lines, like the Corruption line, for a little bit more debuffy style stuff? Or specifically, when I see mass removing stability like this, I don't think DPS. I feel like this should be more for the control playstyle. And what I don't entirely like is the idea that someone might want to build a really offensive, damaging Revenant, and then, you know, Shiro's a no-brainer and it's fun to pick it. But then I also don't like the idea that someone who also wants to go really defensive and tanky also has a no-brainer decision to go Shiro because, hey, he gets the best stability removal and I need that to be able to land my taunts and I need that to be able to keep people CC'd. Like, basically what I'm saying is I think this is a perfect Jarlis thing thematically than it is a Shiro thing. And they could swap it around, you know, and then Shiro gets another free Grandmaster, and oh, hey, what do you know? Why don't we give Shiro a free impossible odds when they get below 25% health, huh? Okay, that last bit they don't have to do, but I do stand by what I say. I think that Dismantle Fortifications doesn't really make perfect sense for Shiro. I've talked about pretty much everything they gave us. Let me know what you think, guys. Are you finally more keen on the Revenant? I know I am. Weapon swap plus this stance, they look awesome, and suddenly I'm really looking forward to the next beta. This one I barely played. I barely played Revenant. I did it to get some footage for you guys for a video, and that was pretty much it. Now, I'm much more excited. There was a tiny little clip at the end of POI where Grouch came on to talk about the big World vs. World event, Golem Rush, which started today, I believe. Talked about how this basically had took nothing from Heart of Thorns development time. He just wanted to push this idea that World vs. World could have these little events, like we had Sneak Attack before, and Sneak Attack was more about testing stuff that could happen with World vs. World long term. This was just for fun, and he said that he's not even really on any other team, but he did this on his own in his free time just to push this out so the World vs. Worlders would have something kind of fun and different to do, at least for this week. And I think that's really awesome to hear, actually. It's nice to know that he kind of put those extra miles in so that World vs. Worlders could have something different to experience. Whether they like it or not, by the end of the week, we'll have to see. But yeah, they talked a bit about that, and the stream closed. So cheers, guys! Thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think about Shiro, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Finally, we may be about to see the Trap Ranger action, which, trust me, is really fun. Catch you next time, guys.
Roy and I were talking about this earlier this week, and like Roy starts spouting off all of this lore that I didn't know he knew, and I was just going, wow, I'm so impressed. And Roy was like, I watched Twin Potatoes video.